Hey, welcome back to Mako's Mythic Menagerie. I'm Mako. Let's get into it. So today we're talking about Chocobos. What the hell are Chocobos? So Chocobos are the massive, overgrown chickens that you see in the Final Fantasy franchise. They were designed by Koichi Ishii. Sorry, don't come for me. I'm not Japanese. I don't speak Japanese. And many people say that he was inspired to create the Chocobos, by this ancient extinct bird by the name of Gistornis. It's basically prehistoric ostrich. It looks very interesting. I'll show it on screen. But the Gistornis seems to be very popular at the time, because some people liken it to other famous imagery in Japan from around that time period. You got Kyoto-chan, if that's correct, which was basically a mascot for a chocolate company, and it looks like a little, basically like a chibi chocobo. And you also got a show called Horse Claws that featured large bird that people rode that was very similar to the Chocobos, and also happened to be based off of the Gistornis. I always, for some reason in my head, I always connected Chocobos to the cockatrice, and looking at them now, I don't know why I made that connection. I guess because they're both half rooster, part rooster, but they're very different in design. It's crazy. I don't know why I made that connection. Like, the cockatrice is very draconic in appearance, and it just, I don't know. So I looked into other mythical creatures that might have inspired or have a similar appearance to the Chocobo, and I found something called the Hippolectrion, which first appears in 5th century BC Greek texts, Greek and Roman texts, where it's basically the front half of a horse and the back half of a rooster, and the name literally translates from Greek or ancient Greek to mean cock horse. So do with that as you will. But the premise, it's a very weird looking creature, but I feel like if you saw that, you could come to the conclusion of the Chocobo. Chocobos act as horses in the Final Fantasy franchise and Beasts of Burden. You could just kind of amalgamate a Hippolectron down into a more refined, more appealing creature that we know as the Chocobo. So I wanted to go into the logistics, kind of Chocobos. I know I didn't do that in the first video I made with the lion turtles, but I was interested in if there was, my first thought was, was it ever the case that a group of warriors rode ostriches into battle, like riding a Chocobo in the Final Fantasy games? And I'm kind of embarrassed that was my first thought, because obviously in real life you can't ride an ostrich into battle. Ostriches are the closest thing we have to Chocobos, but they're fucking birds. They're big birds, the world's largest birds, but they're still birds. They can't carry a full-grown man and any equipment he would need for war. But I did go into some research. So, in South Africa, until recently, it was very common tourist trap. They would bring in tourists by offering tourists the opportunity to ride an ostrich, and they've come under fire in recent years because this was seen as inhumane for the birds. They weren't meant to carry people, and the companies have stated, the ostrich farms that allowed this service have stated, we kept it within the bird's abilities. We never let anyone over 160 pounds ride an ostrich, which, according to them, ostriches are capable of carrying up to almost 200 pounds on top of their own weight, which, okay, I've always known ostriches were the world's largest birds, but just to get a scope of how big the ostrich is, they can grow to 7.8 feet tall. So that if you live in other parts of the world and are smarter about your metrics, because we like to be assholes, that's about 2.4 meters tall. And they can weigh anywhere between 200 and 300 pounds, and I don't know what the conversion for that is. Figure it out yourselves. But that is a big-ass bird. A 300-pound, 8-foot-tall bird that's always pissed off and has razor-sharp claws. So you can see why ostriches have never been able to be fully domesticated. We only started domesticating ostriches in the last 150 years, since the 19th century, late 19th century. So mainly ostriches were domesticated for their feathers, which were seen as high status symbols, as well as their feathers. We also domesticated them for their eggs, and people used to hunt them for their meat. Obviously, people gotta eat. So that's just kind of gives you a scope that even though we have a very similar statured creature to the chocobo, sadly, you're not going to see anyone riding into battle on the back of a majestic ostrich anytime soon, unfortunately. Now, since Final Fantasy's chocobos have become so popular, of course, the chocobo got its own spin-off game. I believe it's called Chocobo's Escape Dungeon, or Mystery Dungeon, or Dungeon Escape, maybe. But also, many other forms of media have also been inspired by the chocobo. And here's a few examples would be the ostrich horses, which the ostrich horse from Avatar: The Last Airbender, very similar to the chocobo or the hippolectron, again, maybe pulling from a similar basis there. Also, as a kid, I remember playing a game, and you guys might know this as well, called Jak and Daxter. And it was probably the first time I ever saw anything that looked similar to a chocobo. I didn't play Final Fantasy when I was that young. Jak and Daxter was much more in my wheelhouse at that time. So I remember this old lady has you go up onto the cliffs and push down this egg, and the chocobo, what is called a flut pops out, and the flut is very obviously similar to the chocobo. Also might be kind of inspired by the Gastronus, because it's got more tail feathers, more similar to a prehistoric bird. Has the same high speed and jumping capabilities that you see chocobos exhibit in the Final Fantasy franchise. And again, with the ostrich horses, you see them armored, which I always thought was funny, because in reality, and if you were to try and do that with ostriches, our form of chocobos, our world's equivalent of chocobos, the bird would not be able to move. So obviously you have some creative liberty with that. But another example of a chocobo-like creature that I know of in other media, I'm not big into anime, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I am a fan of One Piece. And in One Piece, you get to a place called Alabasta, and there's these ducks that are very chocobo-like in nature, and there's a whole squadron of them called the Supersonic Duck Squad, and they're basically chocobos retextured to be ducks instead of roosters, and they move at insanely high speeds and can jump great distances, like many of these other examples. So yeah, that's what I kind of pulled up on chocobos. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and tune in next time for something else.